Hit it, Phil.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Can it be the breeze that fills the trees with rare and magic perfume? Oh, no, it isn't the breeze, it's Jackson time. La-da-da-da.
Well, Jello again. It's great to have everybody here. This is Buck Benny speaking. I have our friend Terry Phillips back to join us. It's been a while. Both of us are a little under the weather, but we're here for your enjoyment. So there you go. I'm in my red, white, and blue. The only thing I could find was my hat. So I thought I'd put my hat on to be blue because we are, this is Independence Day or close to it. From 2023, if you're watching this sometime in the future. And we thought, I just had this, oh, there you go. I had this special that it doesn't fit in yet with our timeline. We've been presenting right now on about 60, I think we're on 61 time frame. And we're just working ourselves through chronologically. I didn't realize we get so bogged down with 59 and 60 taking so long. There's so many different things to present, but it's been wonderful. And we've been having a great special summer. Jack Benny special summer is what we've been calling it. And it'll probably extend past the summer into September and so forth. We'll see. But I decided to do this one out of order. This is 1970 we're jumping up to because of all the specials that I've ever seen. This is probably the one trying to be the most patriotic. Whether it succeeds or not is in the eye of the beholder. Kathy, who couldn't be here, passed on some reviews from the time. And I don't think I'm going to read that unless Terry wants to read it or anything. But basically, it's going to say the same thing that we're probably going to say. It was hit and miss. It's hard to keep this many people. Give them all something meaningful to do and so forth. And so everybody gets barely featured. I mean, every person, I think you could go, oh, I wish that person would have been there longer, done more. They would have given more to do. But anyway, so I'll just run through some of the names that are in here really quick. We have, of the old guard, we have Lucille Ball, we have Jack Benny, we have Bob Hope, Red Skelton, George Burns walks by. The only person in the whole cast other than John Wayne who's not in character is George Burns. And to me, it's one of the funniest little bits that he does. I love it. Anyway, and then we have both Rowan and Martin here from Laugh In. We have half of the Smothers Brothers with Tommy Smothers. We have Captain Kirk here, William Shatner. It would be right after Star Trek ended in '69. The next year is 1970. And then, we have, did I say Jack Benny? We definitely have Jack Benny. Then there's just so many folks. I can't even list them all. The entire cast pretty much of Bonanza is on this thing. So anyway, you will be surprised every time you see a star. It's like, oh, there's another star. There's another star. O'Brien.
Hugh O'Brien.
Hugh O'Brien from his biggest thing was Wyatt Earp, wasn't it? Or TV show, The Life and Times of Wyatt Earp, maybe. Life and Time. No.
I think that's.
I think it was it. Yeah. Anyway, so which was a good one of the first adult westerns next to Gunsmoke, and it was a good show.
And the singers, Bing Crosby,
Johnny
Cash, Roy Clark.
Yep.
You're right.
Oh,
it
right.
goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and Johnny Cash singing on a train. It's so much fun. It looks like the train's moving because his hair is blowing. So it's pretty cool. And then the other star of this whole thing that makes a great appearance and is amazing is the map. They have a map of the United States that I guess it looks bigger than it says. What I read is it was 80 feet by 50 feet, but it sure looks even bigger than that because it's in a lot of the scenes as they're standing on it. The section of when we get to the Civil War part of the special, it cracks in half. Really cool effect for back in 1970, and I just was uh, I remember watching this special as a kid when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember the map is what I think triggered my memory to remember it. And then, of course, some of the stars that were in this. I remember asking my dad, "Who's that? Who's that?" And he would tell me who the people were. But I remember we were excited in watching it. We loved watching Bonanza, and we knew that all the guys in Bonanza were in this, and so I thought they'd all be together, but two of them were together, and then Lauren Green played General Washington. No, President Washington, actually, I think is who he was playing. So at the timeline. Anyway, so we'll go into it and let's talk to Terry. Terry, what are any of your thoughts or anything you noticed about this?
Let's see. So this aired on November 29th of 1970. There wasn't any particular hook for the date. I think this was well past Thanksgiving. So it was just, that was when they put it on.
Yeah, I would have thought it would come out around July, but I guess
sure. Yeah, sure. It would have been an obvious 4th of July thing. One thing that jumped out at me when I looked at the IMDb listing was that out of this enormous cast, there were 4 people listed who were not born in the United States.
Okay.
Care to guess who those were?
Not born in the United States. No, I don't know. Who would that be?
Okay, well, Lauren Green from Bonanza.
I would not guess
William Shatner.
Okay, yeah, Canadian.
Both Canadians. Canadian. Bob Hope was born in Great Britain.
Okay.
And the director, Stan Harris, was also Canadian.
Oh, okay.
And the director had done a lot of these spectaculars. This was right in his wheelhouse. But I thought it was interesting that part of the enthusiasm for American patriotism came from those who were not born here and who became U.S. citizens. And I think all of them did become American citizens.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found on IMDb, which I'm not sure is accurate, is that this was Jack Benny's last performance. But I saw a couple of other things that were broadcast after this. I don't know if they were made after this. But
no, this couldn't be his. It could have been his last guest performance, maybe on a special. But I don't even think that. I thought he was on things after. He certainly had his own specials up until he had him the year of his death in 1974. He had one came out in like January or February or something, and then he passed in December because he was He had his second farewell. He had a first farewell special, and then he had his second farewell special. And he was working on his third when he passed. So I don't know where they're getting their facts from.
But the next year he was on a couple of other shows, not his own. So I don't know where that came from. But people put all kinds of things on the internet.
I know, right? Yeah, people think things and then
One of the things I especially liked, you mentioned that Tommy Smothers was on.
Yeah.
I found 2 things amusing about that. One is that the Smothers brothers were on up against Bonanza. That was the big competition. Yes. And it was nice that they were both on the show, although they didn't appear on the screen together. However, Tommy Smothers was very liberal and John Wayne was not. But really? I thought it was very nice that they found some common ground between them, that they were able to celebrate some of the spirit and values of the United States. And I thought it was a really great way to appeal to a broad spectrum of American viewers. I really like that.
Well, and the same thing can be said with Rowan and Martin, who were on here from Laugh-In, because Laugh-In was still going at the time. It was.
I think so, yeah.
And I was kind of excited to see the Smothers brothers. I was thinking it was going to be both of them, but it was just one, and Rowan and Martin together, because in my mind, they were the same people pretty much, because the Smothers brothers went off the air and then Rowan and Martin came on the air.
Yeah.
And to me, it was a continuation. I remember watching those shows with my dad, and I just thought they were the same guys. They just started to dress fancier, but because they had the same sort of irreverence and things and left leaning for sure.
When I watched the special the first time, I caught a reference to CBS firing the Smothers Brothers, which happened the year before. I listened to it again and I couldn't find it, but do you remember hearing that?
About why they got fired?
It's some reference to them not being on CBS.
Yeah.
Because they had just been fired by CBS.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, and which was amazing that they got fired and yet Laugh-In was still going.
Yeah.
And Laugh-In was probably more controversial than the Smothers Brothers.
I'm not sure. I think the Smothers Brothers were a little more pointed than.
You think so? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, maybe Laugh-In was just more. I think Laugh-In might have been more goofy.
Yeah.
Comedy mixed with more titillation or sexual energy or whatever in the show and things than the Smothers Brothers was possibly. Smothers Brothers was more political.
There's one other thing that jumped out at me. It was hard to miss. Yeah. There's a thing in comedy referred to as a callback. If you tell a joke and then later in your bit, later in your set, later in your routine, you refer to that earlier joke, it's referred to as a callback.
Yeah. And
they did a callback maybe 7 or 8 times, if not more, on this special about well, I don't want to spoil it. So it's about a horse.
Yeah.
And I just, I thought, well, okay, they've done it twice. Well, they've done it 3 times. They're sure they're not going to do it. They've done it 5 times. They just keep hitting it over and over again. And it was hilarious. I don't know
kept beating that dead horse over.
That's exactly right, so to speak. Yeah. But I thought that was pretty funny.
No, I agree. And I thought it was interesting that the bit that probably lands the worst historically is probably the bit between Michael Landon and Haas, Dan Blocker.
Oh.
And Dan Blocker is playing an Indian chief, I guess, and which is, I'm sure they thought was funny to have Dan Blocker do that, who's known for being a cowboy or whatever. And they're fighting over how much to pay for land, and the humor works on some level, but it's hard to look away from the insultingness of it as well to Native Americans and so forth. But all this comedy is of a time, and Terry and I were talking about this before the show, and you just have to accept that that's at the time was considered humorous and things. I think even at the time you may have questioned it and been like, yeah, kind of insensitive. And now the one thing that struck me about that piece is I was thinking to myself, oh man, this piece would have worked. I could see how the writers and things would think, oh, we'll give it to Jack, because with Jack, a money thing would have played. I'm so glad they didn't put Jack in that piece, because the piece he was in is not as controversial in any way, and yet it's still funny. And of everybody's intro, everybody gets clapped on. In fact, the Variety article that Kathy passed on, a Variety article that was a review of the time. It's pretty much like we're saying, a hit and miss sort of thing. But it had mentioned that when folks came on, they got good cheers and good audience reaction. And when they were done, they got less. And so they were going, if it was a great special, they would have gotten as big of a send-off. The only person who came close going in and out was Jack. His was noticeably the loudest applause for coming on the show, just when he first appears, of anybody in the whole show, which I always think is interesting, because this is a great chance to test what I've always wondered. It's like everybody always says they love Jack and the audience loved Jack. And I'm like, well, but did they love Bob Hope? Did they love Lucille Ball? Did they love all these people in the same way or more? And you become where I'm so into Jack that I'm like, am I missing something here, putting him up on a higher pedestal than he should be? But in this show, you could actually compare the applause everybody gets for coming out. It's all the biggest stars that exist. And Jack definitely gets the most applause. And then as he's leaving, he gets the most. But that's a little bit of a cheat because Jack's doing one of his big things, the whole staring at the audience until they laugh sort of thing. He's sort of forcing the laugh in certain ways. But that's Jack and the way Jack performed. So,
well, let me disagree with you.
okay.
I don't think there was a studio audience.
Okay.
I think all of the reaction that we heard, the applause, the laughter,
Yes.
I think that was all added after the fact.
But that's when which is fine. But somebody along the way thought Jack would get the most laughter.
And I don't doubt that. I
Yeah.
don't doubt that. But I think what we heard was not a real live studio audience. In that year they would have mentioned it, and they didn't mention it.
They didn't mention it, yeah. And they never panned to the audience.
Sure that was,
so yeah,
you're pretty sure that was sweetened.
Yeah.
Because Lucy, I mean, all this stuff is subjective too.
Yeah.
Lucy was and to this day remains phenomenally popular.
Yes.
Bob Hope has his fans, know. So I did like very much that they found the gems of each of these performers. I mean, Jack Benny and George Burns, having them do the crossover, it was just perfect. Right. Bob Hope's monologue to the troops, it was just you're a genius, because it was the ultimate version of what we think of when we think about Bob Hope, talking to troops, entertaining troops. So whoever produced this knew what they were doing. They found the sweet spot. But I take your point that the popularity, as reflected by the audience, is hard to measure, because everybody's different. Everybody brings their own taste and their own preferences to this.
I will say this though, Terry, because I was just thinking, okay, so we're saying it was sweetness, which it totally can get. It's just interesting that Variety, which usually is the behind the scenes paper, would mention the applause and use that as part of the review.
Yeah.
That when they were leaving, they weren't getting as much of a reception as
I'm not sure the reviewer had it right.
Okay. And I could believe that the reviewer could have had that wrong. It's just interesting that's the reason I brought it up, because I didn't know it was live or not live.
Yeah, as I was watching it actually jumped out at me that this was canned laughter.
Yeah. Well, and I would think it would be, in that to have that long of a show, it obviously parts of it were not done live for sure.
Right.
Just the way it, with all those actors and the whole thing, I can't imagine that they would get all these actors to come on live and do this one after the other. I mean, it would be an assembly line backstage of who you're going to bring, right? I would assume this was done over a number of weeks or something to get all these people on and doing their bits. And then they'd link all the bits together. John Wayne's piece at the end, I thought was well done for the time, a little heavy-handed, but a lot of this is heavy-handed. And that's, I mean, if you're going to try and be patriotic, then you're going to kind of be heavy-handed sometimes.
I would have liked to use some of that material at the end in my one-man show. I think, I mean, it wasn't Ronald Reagan saying it, but still, it was very consistent with the notion of patriotism at the time.
And I'm kind of surprised they didn't have, wouldn't he have been Governor Ronald Reagan at this time in
1970? Yeah.
So I'm surprised that they didn't have him make an appearance, because you would think that would tie in well, and it'd be the sort of thing he'd be willing to do. On the other hand, it was early in his governing, I believe.
Yeah, he was elected the first time in 66.
I was going to say 68, but whatever is 66.
It was a presidential year.
Yeah.
California.
But the question is, did he want to kind of distance himself?
And then the second time,
acting.
I think he would have just been reelected. I think that's right. I should know this. I wrote a play about him.
So who knows if he'd be interested in doing something like this or not? But anyway, I thought it was well done for what it wanted to be. It was one of the longer specials. It was an hour and 20, I think, is how long it runs for us.
Yeah,
so
119
an hour and a half special or something.
I'm guessing that's because they cut about 10 minutes of commercials out of it, right?
That's what I would think so.
Because there were no local commercials, only the national Anheuser-Busch spots.
Yes, that's what
and Ed McMahon.
Yeah, because I was going to say, when we were just mentioning it, I was just thinking, well, it couldn't it couldn't just be the commercials that are, I mean, it must have been longer, but it's been 2 hours or something to fit in the other commercials, but they didn't do that many commercials back then. And on top of it, a lot of the commercials are left in, like you say, the Anheuser-Busch's are all in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, chances are they just cut out the, like you say, the local commercials, and that was 10 minutes. So that
Yeah.
was a total sense. It was an hour and a half special. But what a wonderful piece to have, a piece of history, and that we can enjoy. And I just thought for 4th of July, it'd be great to bring this out. But having said that, you're doing something somewhat can be seen as patriotic, I suppose, and things. And so I thought we'd give that a mention since this is going to be coming out. You have your one-man show for Ronald Reagan that's going to be coming out, and you can tell us a little about when that's going to be. But the thing I'm excited about that's new that you just had come out is you're also doing a podcast on Ronald Reagan. And we'll do a link in this show to so you can catch that podcast. So I'll definitely look down below in the show notes, and we'll connect you up to the podcast. And your one-man show was doing a fundraiser, but I think it's over now.
That's right.
But is there any, do you have a Patreon? Do you have anything they can do to help you out with the show or anything like that?
No, we don't at the moment. We had done a Kickstarter campaign. It did not succeed, so we didn't get any revenue from that. If one were to go to my website, there's an address where people could send the contributions. This is not a nonprofit, so there's no tax benefit if that's
Right.
the reason. Don't bother. But if you want to support the arts and support our project, you can go to reaganplay.com and contribute that way.
Well, tell us a little about both of those things and what kind of what they're about a little bit. And we're going to do a podcast about these in long term, but I just thought, it's a patriotic podcast. Why not talk about Ronald Reagan a little bit and stuff?
Sure. So 4 years ago, I was asked by a friend of mine to write a one-man show for him about Ronald Reagan. And I did that. And for a variety of reasons, he withdrew from the project, and we chose a new actor to play Reagan. And then, of course, because of the pandemic, theaters closed, and now we're finally able to get people into theaters again. And so this play, which is called Ronald Reagan Saves the World, will premiere on September the 1st at the Center Stage Theater in Santa Barbara, California. And it's about an hour and a half of the 40th president of the United States reflecting on his life. It's an evening in the Oval Office. And it's probably the most ambitious and the most satisfying project I have ever worked on. And I'm really delighted that we're finally able to get it in front of an audience.
And then you've taken I assume the research for that and things made you think, well, I can do a podcast about this too. So that branched out to the podcast that I think you told me earlier was going to be around a dozen or more episodes. And you have the first one out now.
Correct.
And kind of, can you explain a little bit about how the podcast is different from the one-man show?
Right. The one-man show is drawn largely from Ronald Reagan's own words and then stitched together with your humble playwright crafting a story that links it all together. Mm-hmm. The podcast is called The Secret Life of Ronald Reagan, and it's about things you probably didn't know. The one-man show is almost entirely drawn from the public record. The podcast looks beneath the surface, and the first one is called Reagan and the Challenger, and it's the story behind the speech that Reagan gave following the Challenger disaster and how they made that transition from what was supposed to be his State of the Union address to this other speech that he gave from the Oval Office. Some of the other subjects will be about Reagan being left-handed, his eyesight, his hearing, the fact that he was a lifeguard when he was a young man, his relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev, these sorts of topics that people are aware of in general, but the specifics might not be that well known.
Right.
And so that's what we do. And each of these is going to be about 15 or 20 minutes long. Not a deep dive, but touching on some aspects of Reagan's life that are probably not that familiar to most people.
Right. And then the first one, I was expecting just a chat, about Reagan and things, but there's clips that you use, audio clips and things and so forth to underscore your point, and not just from Reagan talking, but from other folks talking too. And you interview some folks too, correct?
That's right. The person I talked to the longest on that first podcast episode is the editor of the Washington Monthly Magazine, Paul Glastras. And Paul was one of President Bill Clinton's senior speechwriters. And he is able to talk about the speech from the point of view of a presidential speechwriter, a former presidential speechwriter.
Which I love that part. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we also have, because this was the middle of the Cold War, we also have someone who had been who was born in and was living in the Soviet Union at the time of the Challenger disaster. And so who's able to explain what it was like from that point of view, from the Soviet perspective. And he is coincidentally one of the actors whose voice is heard in my one-man show.
Nice.
That's another little tie-in.
Now, do you have other episodes done yet, like the second or third or anything? And no, You're not feeling well, so it's going to be a little while till we get.
Yeah, we're at this point. We're probably looking at about one a month.
Yeah.
If I can increase that pace, I will. But I don't have a lot of time left. This is precisely 2 months before we open in Santa Barbara. We're talking on July the 1st. We go up on September the 1st. So I've got a little bit to do. You can see on that table behind me, if you're watching, some of the many props that I'm going to be driving to Santa Barbara.
I'm just so delighted you had time for us today, which is great.
Well, it's always wonderful to talk with you and to talk about this passion project of mine. I'm so happy to be doing this and finally able to get it in front of an audience. But it is remarkable how many details there are, how much work there is to do in getting a live performance on the stage. I now understand why most playwrights don't produce their own shows.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think any of us will really have any understanding of that like you do from the inside. There's just no way. It's one of those things you can't empathize with or understand unless you go through it. So, but just know we're delighted that you're doing this, and it should be a fun and interesting piece. I'd love to see it. I'd love for you at some point towards the end of the run to either film it or record it in some way that if it goes away, it'll still live on somehow, and we'll be, for those of us who don't have it come to our hometown and can't get a chance to see it, we'll be able to see it or hear it.
Well, we'll definitely record it. We are definitely planning to take it on the road. In fact, we have already got 2 venues set following the Santa Barbara run. But I have very ambitious plans. I want to take this to all 50 states and to other countries, because there's no place on earth where the name Ronald Reagan is unfamiliar.
Right.
So go to reaganplay.com and we will post, as we have future venues scheduled, we'll post those locations and dates, and I hope you'll be able to come see it in person.
Yep. Sounds great. So I can't wait. Anyway, but while you're waiting, enjoy his podcast, because it's very entertaining as well. And like I say, we'll connect to that, all of that things that he mentioned in the show notes, so you can just click on them and get there. But let's get back to this special. I just want to say, is there anything else that you want to cover in this that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, there's one last thing I want to say. I'm always amazed when I hear an actor who is not known for being a singer, when they turn out to be really good singers.
Yes.
And of course, there were a lot of great singers on this show, but many of the actors who appear are not known for having a singing voice, and so a lot of them also sang. Phyllis Diller sang, Ed McMahon sang, Ronan Martin sang. But the one voice, sadly, that scratched my ear a little bit at the end was John Wayne.
John Wayne.
John Wayne was not a singer.
Yeah.
And he hit a note that, well, let's just say it's a good thing that the Duke was such a great actor, because if he'd had to support himself as a singer, it would be who?
Well, and at the end of this, they all are singing "God Bless America," right?
That's right.
And it goes through, and each person has a line. It's really neat,
right.
actually. I remember that scene that as a kid, and that's standing out because it's a chance to kind of have each one of them sort of take a bow at the end.
Yeah.
By going through every single one of them and doing it.
Was wonderful. It was really wonderful.
It was really great the way it was done. The two people that stood out to me were John Wayne, like you say, and the other one was Jack. And probably because I'm more in tune with Jack than other performers.
Yeah.
But when he hit it, I was thinking, okay, he plays the violin. I've heard him sing on his radio show at times. He usually can hit the notes okay and everything, but he wasn't that great. I mean, it wasn't like, I think he was hitting the notes maybe, but it didn't sound great. It didn't. And it depends on who they bracket you against, right? If the person before you is really good and the person after you is really good and you're not so hot, it's going to stand out like crazy. So that's yeah. But it just an entertaining special. I think folks will, if you can just accept that it's of his time, and if you can also step away from the Bud Light controversy that's going on right now, and it's losing market share by the day, and just enjoy the Budweiser commercials for what they are back in 1970, and let the current things going on by you. I think you'll enjoy this performance.
Go Clydesdales.
Yes, that's right. Love the Clydesdales. Anyway, thanks everybody. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time for more of our Jack Benny special summer. And Terry, thank you for joining us. Terry is joining us whether he likes to or not throughout the summer, because we've done a lot of the specials other years and things, so they'll be coming back. Especially, actually, in the next upcoming weeks, we're going to start hitting those early Jack Benny specials that we've already done before. So we'll be representing them as part of our summer.
I'll be looking forward to seeing me.
Yeah, and you can see both of us gain beards, lose beards, sort of things happen all. Oh, there you go. Enjoy. We'll see you guys next time.
Now, a special program in living color on NBC.
And now, Anheuser-Busch Incorporated of St. Louis, Newark, Los Angeles, Tampa, Houston, Columbus, Jacksonville, and Merrimack. Brewers of Michelob, Busch, and world-renowned Budweiser, the king of beers, proudly presents John Wayne, starring in Swing Out, Sweet Land, with Anne Margaret, Lucille Ball, Jack Benny, Dan Blocker, Roscoe Lee Brown, Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, Roy Clark, Bing Crosby, Phyllis Diller, the Doodletown Pipers, Lorne Green, Celeste Holm, Bob Hope, Michael Landon, Dean Martin, Ross Martin, Greg Morris, David Nelson, Rick Nelson, Hugh O'Brien, Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, William Shatner, Red Skelton, Tommy Smothers, Leslie Uggams, and Dennis Weaver.
In 76 the sky was red, thunder rumbling overhead. Bad King George couldn't sleep in his bed, and on that stormy morn, poor Uncle Sam was born.
Well, I guess you're all saying here it comes. Just put John Wayne and a show about America together, and you're in for a lot of preaching about what a great country this is and how we should all be patriotic and love our flag and be glad we live in the good old USA, problems and all. Well, that's about the size of it, except it'll be short on preaching. Countries are like people. Some take themselves so seriously that you won't get a laugh out of them in 100 years. And others are more apt than not to stick their tongues in their cheek and tell funny stories about themselves. And America, thank God, is one of those yarn-spinning places. I guess what I'm trying to say is that some folks have the idea that patriotism's gone out of fashion. We seem to think that patriotic days are dead.
We used to sing of our homeland with passion, but now we seem to shy away from it instead. I think it's time we hit the nail right on the head. This is a great country, so let's shout it clear and loud. Clear and loud. Take a look in your history book, and you'll see why we should be proud. Be proud. Now hats off to America, the home of the free and the brave. If this is flag waving, I said flag waving, do you know of a better flag to wave? Do you know of a better flag to wave?
If this is flag waving, you know of a better flag to wave? Those aren't my words, or Glenn's. They're the words of a Russian immigrant named Irving Berlin, one of the many millions who came to find a better life in the United States of America. It started back in the 1600s with the 13 colonies. In those days, America's only inhabitants were Indians. Since there were no rule books about how to get along in the New World, a lot of the early settlers went about it the wrong way, like, for example, moving right in on the Indians without even asking their permission. On the other hand, some of our people went about it the right way. That's Peter Minuet joining the group in the year 1626. Why don't we eavesdrop?
I want to buy an island.
How much you pay?
300 trinkets, many colored beads, 400 bits of cloth, 63 oranges, 3 French hens.
Hold it. Me think 'em Indian get cheated. Trinkets and colored beads and colored cloth jazz no weather. How much this good for in cold cash?
$24 worth.
Oh, now you're talking. Got a deal.
Hold it, friend. I got a hunch somebody's getting gypped here. This piece of land you're buying, this Manhattan Island, in the years to come could be the home of millions of people all crowded together on this hunk of land breathing the same air. Why, there'll be buildings, traffic, smokestacks of industry, a crowded, pulsing, busy city.
Me think you're right. Somebody is getting cheated. Me give you back $2. Thank you, tall man.
You're very welcome.
We see much of you in future in movies. I think we bite 'em much dust in future from tall man.
The incident known as the Boston Massacre took place in 1770. A real forerunner to 1776, because it produced the first casualties in the American Revolution.
I'm Samuel Gray, American. I died at the hands of the British in protest.
My name is Patrick Carr, American, and I died for my country.
My name is James Caldwell, American. I died in 1770 for liberty.
My name is Samuel Maverick, American. I died in 1770 for the love of America.
My name is Crispus Attucks, American. I died in 1770 fighting for freedom. I hope it was worth it.
So do I, Mr. Attucks. So do I. Boston Harbor, the night of December the 16th, 1773. The town is quiet. The colonists going about their business as usual, except they weren't drinking any tea. Oh, they liked tea, all right. They just didn't care for the heavy tax old King George had put on them. So some of the boys decided to do what you're supposed to do with tea. Add a little water. Only this time they added a whole harbor full of water. For the next few months, the fish in Boston's harbor had all the tea they wanted, tax-free. By now, things had gone too far to stop. That's the way it is with freedom. Once you get it in your craw, you want it. You just can't live without it. 1775. With freedom in their hearts, powder in their muskets, and the British in their sights, the men who came here looking for liberty made a down payment on it. Hear that? April 19th, blast-off time on Lexington Common. The Continental soldier was a young man with a dream and the guts to ride that dream. Much as he hated war, he knew that the Declaration was nothing without the independence. So he joined the fight for unconditional freedom, the right to be his own man, in his own home, in his own country. I guess the closest the dream and those kids came to dying together was in the winter of 1777 in Pennsylvania at a place called Valley Forge. And any Continental soldier, from Private John Smith to General George Washington, who survived that little bivouac, knew he'd been to hell and back. But even in our first war, the fighting would stop from time to time for those precious moments of laughter that cushion the pain of war.
Hey, this is Bob coming to you from Valley Forge, Hope. Last night it got down to 10 degrees below zero, making this the world's first Cold War. You know, Valley Forge is so cold, last night I ordered a beer and the head on it was wearing earmuffs. And I had breakfast with Benedict Arnold this morning. He said, "What do you want, Bob?" I said, "Eggs, Benedict." Unfortunately, we ate in the enlisted men's mess. Do you guys ever have eggs on the shingle? You guys should have been with me last night. I stayed at a flea bag hotel in Boston. Never closed my eyes. All night long, some nut was running around yelling, "The British are coming, the British are coming." How we ever got that horse up on the 7th floor, I'll never know. If that wasn't enough to keep me awake, some guy across the street was waving a lantern looking for girls all night. And he was willing to pay them car fare. But not much. Only 1 if by land and 2 if by sea. Yes, sir. Paul Revere, the Midnight Cowboy of 1775. Hey, and let's not forget those brave guys up in Lexington and Concord. The Minutemen, ready to fight in a minute. Well, you're looking at a half a minute man. That's right. When you got an act like mine, you better be ready to fight in half the time. You like my new golf club? Actually, this belongs to Thaddeus Crosby. This morning, he played golf with the British and put a whole regiment in the hospital. Let's remember why we're fighting this war, men. To get back home to our girlfriends. Remember that. You remember what girlfriends are? Those soft, sweet, tender, caressable young things our wives were right up until the wedding. And it's no use trying to smuggle girls into camp. Last night, Corporal Stuyvesant threw a fishnet over a topless waitress and tried to bring her in as live bait. But the general saw through that. Yeah. Yeah, her net didn't quite cover her gross. And I want to tell you, the sergeant knows one of you guys got a girl in camp. He even knows which tent she's in. It's the one with no snow around it every morning. Get a load of old Ben Franklin. He gets a hot key in his hand and he's hailed as a genius. I get a hot key in my hand, the house detective throws me out. I want to tell you, my ancestors came over in the Mayflower. Yes, sir. It was my granddaddy who first stepped ashore on Chrysler Rock.
That's Plymouth Rock.
You take care of your sponsor, I'll take care of mine. And you remember Bunker Hill? That was the first time our troops ever fought in such cold. 10 degrees below zero. One poor corporal pulled guard duty, shot a redcoat 5 times, only to find out it was our lieutenant with a chapped chest. Hey, and I want to ask you, doesn't Washington ever go home anymore? Every place I go, all I see are signs, George Washington slept here. Even last night at that Fleabag Hotel in Boston, George Washington slept here. How we ever got that horse up on the 7th floor, I'll never know. Now, here's a little lady to sing a song for you. She's a real patriot. I ought to know it. 3 o'clock this morning in my room, she declared her independence. And she told me what was good enough for Grandma ain't good enough for her. So let's give the little hand a big lady, huh? Here she is, right here.
Grandma was a lady, sewed and cleaned and cooked, scrubbed her pots, raised her tots, the dear old gal was hooked. She stitched her little stitches, her life was applesauce. The thing that was boss. Yeah, the thing that was britches was boss. She had no voice in government, and bondage was her fate. She only knew what love meant from 8 to 8. And that's a heck of a fate. It was good enough for Grandma, the good old gal with frills, feathers and fuss. It was good enough for Grandma, good enough for Grandma, but it ain't good enough for us.
thanks for the memories. I really shed a tear when I think of Paul Revere. He rode all night to save our plight, but just think of his rear. Oh, thank you. Thank you all so much. Good night, everybody.
I guess you all recognize this. The Liberty Bell. It tolled for freedom in the 1700s, and it stands today as a reminder of our great heritage. You know, nation building is a pretty serious business. Usually starts with the word. Man first thinks the words to express what it is that he wants. Once he finds them, he tries to make his deeds and actions match those words. What better example than the Declaration of Independence?
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights,
that among these are life,
liberty,
and the pursuit of happiness.
that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of reason,
It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. Laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form,
Them shall seem most likely to affect their safety
and happiness. Prudence indeed will bring that government's long established be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown.
Oh, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves.
Scene, New York. The year 1789. The occasion, the inauguration of our first president. George Washington, having been duly sworn in earlier today, finds relaxation talking to some of the men who helped create the government that is now about to be put to the test of leadership.
Sir, Benjamin Franklin sends his regrets. He will be unable to be with you this day.
Ah, well, at 84 years of age and bedridden, Benjamin deserves his time to rest.
Well, without Ben's help, I would still be rewriting the Declaration of Independence.
Modestly spoken, Thomas. You'll require such tact as our Secretary of State.
The Honorable Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton.
Mr. Adams, Mr. Jefferson, and how shall I address you, sir?
Well, this morning, as the ship carrying me here from Mount Vernon arrived in the harbor, I was called by many, many names.
So I heard one enthusiast refer to you as Your Royal Highness, President of the United States of America, defender of the liberty of all the people.
And to compound, the band was playing God Save the King.
Well, I think of you as Mr. President.
Mr. President. Yeah. It has the unroyal simplicity we all seek.
You know, in the States, people are calling you the father of our country.
True, but I don't believe good morning, Mr. Father of our country sounds quite right. And now, gentlemen, I bid you all good night. Godspeed. Tomorrow's a new day. Indeed, tomorrow's a new world.
Good night, Mr. President.
Good night, Mr. President.
Gentlemen.
Oh, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to ask you something. Well, let me put it this way. Is it true that you threw a dollar, a silver dollar, across the Potomac?
Well, many people, of course, do feel that I threw the silver dollar across the Potomac. Actually, it was across the Rappahannock.
Oh, the I mean, you sure it was the Rappahannock?
Oh, yes.
Not the Potomac?
No.
Well, good. Then this dollar belongs to me. Oh, Mr. President, another thing. Your second violinist is lousy.
Hello, Jack. Working?
So while the men who had survived one revolution were putting their ideas of leadership to the test up north, down south in a building something like this, a man named Whitney took out a patent on a machine that was to kick us off on our second revolution, an industrial revolution. What do you say we go in and say hello to Mr. Whitney?
Everybody picks some cotton sometime. Here's Houdini went to Naples, changed his name to Tony, shoved a pizza in his beer and called it minestrone.
Howdy, Mr. Whitney.
Oh, you can call me Ellie.
Eli.
Well, nice to know you, Mr. Eli.
No, Mr. Whitney, you're Eli.
How about that? I work here all morning. Somebody's out there changing my name.
Ask you what you're doing?
Yeah, just tinkering. You care to join me in a tink?
What's this thing you're tinkering on?
Now, you just get your cotton-picking hands off my cotton-picking thing.
Well, what do you call your thing?
That's my cotton beer.
Your cotton beer? You sure you don't mean cotton gin?
Well, not on this program, baby. I don't need no 8 Clydesdale horses to pull a martini. Besides, whoever named the horse Clyde, unless it was Clyde and Dale and Roy and all them.
Mind if I ask how this cotton beer works?
Heck no, you go right ahead and you act.
All right, how does it work?
Funny you should act. I'll tell you, baby. Now, the cotton beer, excuse me, let me explain this whole thing. You get the, see, you get the cotton beer. Now, you gotta have, you chew this cotton up real good, then you gotta have something that tastes good to rinse it down with.
How did we get you started on this idea?
Well, it was my boy, Bud.
Bud?
Bud! Come on in here and show yourself to this young man that's doing a bad impression of John Wayne. Hi, Bud.
This is your boy, Bud?
Yeah, baby, up until we go swimming. Now, you show this young man your Australian crawl.
I better leave you two alone. I left my horse double parked.
How he ever got that horse up on the 7th floor, I'll never know.
Meanwhile, back at the country.
The country at the turn of the century was really busting her stays. The flag was adding more stars. Vermont, 1791. Kentucky, 1792. Tennessee in 1796. And on March 1st, 1803, Ohio came in. But 2 months later, we had a real windfall. The Louisiana Purchase. Have a look at it. Yes, the Louisiana Purchase gave all those restless Americans back east a new frontier, a new place to head to. Folks came from just about everywhere, even including this family starting out from Hardin County, Kentucky in the year 1814.
Whoa! Oh, boy.
Why are we stopping, Tom?
Oh, it's a danged wheel. Gotta get it fixed.
Just sit there, neighbor. I'll get it.
Much obliged.
Oh, Tom, I'm not sure we're doing the right thing, moving the young'uns and all.
Well, of course we're doing the right thing, Nancy. People back east are jammed in so tight that you're like hay in a stack. Can't walk 5 miles without hearing somebody else's axe or seeing somebody else's chimney smoke.
Well, I just pray the Lord will take care of us, Tom. What's the matter, honey? Put your head down.
Now, Nancy, I don't want you spoiling the boy. I'm going to be needing him with me to do the planting and help with the chores and all. That learning that you're giving him, that's just something that's going to have to wait its time.
Well, then I'll get him up early and start the learning. I'll learn him some more at night. But this boy's going to know more than you and me ever had a chance to.
You know, years back, I used to dream of doing for you and giving you things, and now everything that we own, we got in this wagon. Heading out in that whole great big country stretched out ahead of us. Nobody knowing what's going to happen to it or to us. Everybody just trying to find his own way in it.
But that's all I'm praying for us, Tom. To be a part of something. And to find our own way in it. You and me and little Sarah and Abraham.
Now, Nancy, you promised me. You've made me a promise that when we got to Illinois territory that you'd call him Abe.
The wheel's all fixed now, neighbor.
Well, thank you. What can I pay you?
Maybe sometime I'll need a wheel fixed.
Well, I just hope that the good Lord sees fit to let us all live long enough for our family to repay yours.
Amen. Mr. Lincoln, amen.
Thank you.
Obliged.
Yeah!
Amen, Mr. Lincoln. Amen. So the child of destiny moved west to grow into the man who would remind a later generation that an earlier generation had declared all men are created equal, and who died trying to prove it. But in these early 1800s, Other men were proving other things. This printer here, he puts out a page a day, guaranteed by the First Amendment that whatever he prints, folks have a right to read. Let's go in and see what's news. What seems to be the trouble, printer?
Oh, I can't get this darn thing to work.
Why don't you get it fixed?
Fixed? Fixed? You can't do that. Haven't you heard of freedom of the press? Can't fix the press, you know.
Can you make a good living at it?
Oh, yeah. There's big money in printing. Wait up.
That bill has Martha's picture on it.
Yeah? Well, they just said put Washington's picture on it. They didn't say which one. Well, anyhow, she looks like George. Especially from the back.
Well, I guess old habits are hard to break.
Huh?
I see Paul Revere was out horseback riding again last night.
Yeah, how he ever got that horse on the 7th floor, I'll
never know. You sure seem to like your work,
Oh,
printer.
I love it. I've been a printer all my life.
Uh-huh.
I guess you might say that I've got printer's ink in my veins.
Printer's ink in your veins?
In all of them. Got a pin on you? I'll show you.
Here it comes, folks.
Oh. How about that? My right arm doesn't know what my left arm's writing.
I sure would like to know how this whole shooting match works.
Well, you're too late for today's paper.
Oh?
Oh, yes. We've already put her to bed.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah. Want to go upstairs and kiss her goodnight?
I guess I better be moving on.
Say, why don't you mosey out to California and get rich in the big gold strike?
Gold strike, California, that doesn't happen for 50 years.
I know that, but look at the head start you'll get.
Printer, here's the editorial you wrote.
Oh, yes. Before you go, stranger, tell me what you think of this. It's a little editorial that I've written.
Be glad to.
Let us be aware in these infant years of our beloved republic, there are those who wait to celebrate our failure. Be not disheartened. This will always be so, for we have lighted our candle of liberty in a dark world, and each of us is in charge of keeping it lighted. And though the winds of dissent may threaten our flame, despair not, remembering that a nation which allows dissent is stronger from within and brighter from without.
For when dissent becomes a crime, hope becomes despair. Dissent, but dissent honorably. Dissent with faith in your hearts, not despair. Dissent to rebuild, not to destroy. Dissent from within, for dissent from without becomes attack. Speak out for what you believe in, at least as loudly as you speak against the system. For gentlemen, if ours is a generation to say democracy will not administer to the people, let it be a conscious decision arrived at only after every opportunity for man to rule himself has failed.
Print it. And it must have worked because in the early 1800s, we kept adding more states. 1812, Louisiana. 1816.
Hoosier State of Indiana is proud to add another star to our banner.
1817.
The Magnolia State of Mississippi and all her own star-spangled citizens are proud to become the 20th state.
1818.
What so proudly we hail now flies over the new state of Illinois.
1819.
The cotton state of Alabama is pleased to join the home of the brave.
1820.
Great pine tree state of Maine, cast this vote to join the land of the free. Yeah.
1821.
The Show Me territory of Missouri becomes the 24th state by the dawn's early light.
Andrew Jackson's presidency marked the victory of the common man in America. Earlier presidents had been from the aristocratic class. Now one of us was in there, and he was having himself a time. The fancy minuet was drowned out by a Cajun fiddle and a black American invention called the banjo.
Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me, 'cause I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana, my true love for to see. It rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee.
The mid-1800s brought some good news and some bad news to the country. Good news came in a fistful of states. Starting in 1836 with the proud and great state of Arkansas. Then in 1837,
The Wolverine state of Michigan. 26 star on our flag.
2 in 1845,
The family-sized state of Texas.
And Florida, the Sunshine Land.
1846,
The Hawkeye state of Iowa.
1848,
The Badger state of Wisconsin.
1850,
The Golden State. California.
1858,
The Great North Star state of Minnesota.
1859,
The 33rd state, Oregon.
1861,
The sunflower state of Kansas.
1863,
The mountain state of West Virginia.
1864.
And the 36th state, Nevada.
The bad news of the 1800s came in the form of a pretty rough argument. Because for the first time in our lives, we were having a family fight. This is Appomattox, where it supposedly all ended. The tombstone reads, Civil War, rest in peace. Born 1861, died pretty soon, I hope.
Two brothers on their way. Two brothers on their way.
1865, April. Two events. Abraham Lincoln gave up his life. Robert E. Lee gave up his sword. One more blue, one more gray. Now that the North and South were back together again, it was up to 3,000 miles of steel track and 10 million feet of lumber to join the East and the West. To the railroading man, the train whistle was his music, the rhythm of the wheels his heartbeat, and the coal and steam his blood and sweat. The train his life. Bullet!
Rolling on to Promontory, Utah. We are rolling through the prairie grass and a mountain pass, breaking trail for the rail and the iron wheel, tying east to west with a ribbon of steel. Hell on wheels, that's what they call the westbound crew that worked for the Union Pacific. Mostly Irishmen who left their native land to escape a famine. Hard-working, hard-living, hard-loving, burly men that would wage a month's pay on a fist fight. Men of determination and purpose, for nothing could stop their ever westward movement. 10 spikes to the rail, 400 rails to the mile, 2 miles of track a day. Rolling, rolling on to Promontory, Utah. We are rolling through the prairie grass and a mountain pass, breaking trail for the rail and the iron wheel, tying east to west with a ribbon of steel. Out in California, they were faced with a gigantic task of driving a railroad east right through the Sierra Nevada mountains. A wall of solid granite 100 miles thick. 16,000 men, mostly young Chinese, labored a summer's boiling sun and in a bitter blast of wintertime, moving ton after ton of earth, timber, and stone. Not with machines, mister, with elbow grease, shovel and pick, man against mountain, muscle against mountain, brains against mountain. And those days would pass that it looks like a mountain might win. In the end, it gave away. Rolling, rolling breaking trail for the rail and the iron wheel. Tying east to west with a ribbon of steel. At Promontory Summit on May 10th, 1869, the last spike, a golden spike, was driven into a laurel tie. And from Omaha across the Nebraska plains, over the Rocky Mountains of Wyoming, a distance of 1,086 miles, came locomotive number 119 to gently kiss cowcatchers with locomotive Jupiter out from Sacramento, 690 miles away over the Sierra Nevada range. And around the nation was telegraphed a single word, done! And east and west were one. Rolling, rolling, on to Promontory, Utah, we are rolling. Through the prairie grass and a mountain pass, breaking steel for the rail and the iron wheel. Tying east to west with a ribbon of steel.
Well, the railroads were branching out like veins in a body above the ground. The veins of gold and silver were petering out below the ground. Still, the iron horse didn't put the four-legged one completely out of business. Somehow the cowboy managed to hang on. But it was different for the miners, because when they struck out, there was nothing left to do but pack up and get, leaving their empty towns behind them. Ghost towns. The Old West, the Wild West, is long gone. But that doesn't matter. What does matter is that nothing ever dies if folks don't want it to.
How much for a room and bath?
We've been known to get $50 a night when times are good.
How much tonight?
$1.
Sheriff, how come you got me locked up in this stirred jail?
Because last night you got yourself in a fight, sent 14 men to the hospital.
What was the fight about?
About whether we need a larger hospital.
Must be a lot of ghosts around here. Bet I know how to wake them up.
Beer for everybody!
Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling Clementine. You are lost and gone forever. Feel so sorry
canyon, in a cabin, excavating for a mine, dwelt a miner, 49er, and his daughter, Clementine. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling Clementine. Thou wert lost and gone forever, dreadful sight, Clementine. Drove she duckling to the water every morning, just at 9. Hit her foot against a splinter, fell into the foaming brine.
Oh, my darling, Clementine, you are lost and gone forever. Dreadful sorry, Clementine.
Then the miner, 49er, soon began to peek and find. Thought he ought go join his daughter in the water. Now he's with his Clementine.
Oh, my darling, Clementine, you are lost and gone forever. Dreadful sorry, Clementine. Oh, my darling, Clementine, you are lost and gone forever. Dreadful sorry,
Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling, darling, darling Clementine. Thou art lost and gone forever, dreadful sorry. Dreadful sorry,
By the time 1888 rolled around, the women folk were hungry for another try at the White House. They'd already made one stab at it back in 1872, when they ran Victoria Claflin Woodhull. This time, they all got behind Mrs. Belva A. Lockwood. Now, how would that sound? Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Mrs. Belva A. Lockwood.
As we gather here on the eve of this election, I want all of you to know one thing. This girdle is killing me. I am here to ask for your support. I want your support. I need your support. I beg your support, because you know I look better with all the support I can find. And when I'm elected president, you're all welcome at the White House anytime, except Thursday when I'll be doing my hair. You all know my slogan, the White House or bust.
You'll never get in the White House!
And you
never get a bust either.
And when I'm elected president, the White House will be a pink house. And all future wars will be fought by men over 70. And the weapons will be canes and slippers.
Sisters, arise now, off with the ball and chain, off with the men dictating what we do. Fight for equality as our way of life. Abe Lincoln freed us too. It was good for rallies that would hold gallant with the frills and the feathers and fuss we do. It was good for equality and diamond, but it ain't free. No, it won't be free. No, it ain't going to be
By the time the century ended, we had close to 76 million between our oceans. The new nation had become the dream of people all over the world, and millions came in leaps and bounds, with little more than the clothes on their backs and hope in their hearts. And all they asked was for a chance to put their two hands to work in our free marketplace. Europe's poorest became America's middle class. Men willing to work found no limits on their ambitions. And so in our first 2 centuries in this God-given land, men with a dream had converted untold acres of forests and lakes and rivers and plains, mountains and valleys into a land of opportunity. Here is a lady that came to our shores from France in 1886, Miss Liberty.
Yea, Mr. Clemens.
Well, nice to see you, Frederick. Won't you pull up a thought and join me?
I'd be delighted to sit with an old and respected friend.
Thank you.
This is quite a moment. Samuel Clemens, alias Mark Twain, born 1835, died 1910, meets Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, who later shortened that to Frederick Douglass to protect his life. Born 1817, died 1895. Let's listen in. Every word you're about to hear is true, mostly in direct quotes from these two gentlemen. Accent on the gentle.
Sitting here, I find myself trying to imagine what Huckleberry Finn would have thought about that grand old lady out there in the harbor, or Tom Sawyer, or the girls, Becky and Polly.
Oh, my favorite, Big Jim.
Sad to say, you know, some of your friends object to the character of Jim in Huckleberry Finn. Of course, I can only regret that they're behaving as stupidly as whites often do.
I doubt those who criticize you are aware, as I am, of 2 young men of my color you sent through college.
I'm so proud of those boys, too.
Well, you should be. One a gifted minister, the other a graduate of Yale Law School. Our country can use more of both.
I happen to believe very strongly in the family of mankind. And on that premise, whatever I can do for my fellow man, of any color, is my partial reparation for treatment others may not have accorded him. Goodness is due from every white man to every black man.
You are living proof, Samuel, that men are better than their theology.
You know, I do believe I saw Miss Liberty up there cock an ear to hear that.
It would not be the first time I've spoken to her.
I know what you mean. I've told her a few things myself. I have been blessed with liberty, thanks to those who came before me to this land.
And I have been blessed with thoughts of liberty, thanks to those who will come after me in this land.
Dignity has shaken my hand.
And waved at me.
I am aware that there are wrongs to be righted.
Because of rights that have been wronged.
I have known freedom since I was born as a child.
And I, since the day I escaped as a slave.
I have long been concerned with injustice in our states.
And I of the state of our injustice.
As the midnight of my day on earth draws near, I ask nothing but the improvement of mankind.
Of all mankind.
I have never claimed my country to be perfect.
Nor have I.
There's opportunity for improvement in these not-so-united states.
That they may truly be united states.
I have no doubt that such improvements will be made, eventually.
Hope burns within me. They will be, eventually.
I have made every conscious effort to live by the golden rule.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
She's a mighty lady. I wonder what she thinks about these years.
I don't know, but I imagine she prays a lot.
Lord God, who has brought millions to our shores, grant that each of them shall find the freedom he sailed for in this land, which honors all who honor it. Lord God, who has brought man from wagon train to space capsule and filled this great country, imperfect though it may be called by some, give equal dignity to all. Lord God, remind fiery young hearts that passion works best when tempered with reason, and that nothing was ever built up and torn down at the same time. Lord God, remind us constantly the land we call home wasn't built in a day. Bear with our failures, forgive us our trespasses. Lord God, the torch I hold high is liberty's nightlight.
Well, here we are way down south in North Carolina. Kitty Hawk, to be exact. A couple of Ohio brothers got their heads in the clouds. I see by the sign that you boys are the Wright brothers.
Well, you might say I'm a Wright brother, but Orville here, he's a little more on the liberal side.
Talk around town is that you're building a flying machine.
I didn't know that.
Well, what did you think we were building?
Looks like just another bicycle to me.
What did you think when we put the wings on it?
I thought it had died and gone to heaven.
Let's get back to work. We're going to make it possible for man to fly.
You should have seen me last night.
You were flying?
Stacked up till midnight.
Your plane was stacked up till midnight?
No, my girl was.
I want to hear about it.
Folks say that you've been working on something in this barn that may get man off the ground, and I want to know the principle behind it.
Did he say he's got the principal on the ground behind the barn? Good, because the math teacher's a lot more fun.
I don't want to hear about it.
But tell her not to bring her horse.
I don't want to hear about her.
Because she never lets you lock the barn door until after the horse is gone.
Go to your room.
I can't. The horse is in my room.
How he ever got that horse on the 7th floor, I'll never know. Well, I can see that you boys are busy, so I'll just mosey along.
Come back anytime, stranger.
I don't want him to come back anytime, stranger.
That's not what I meant.
He's strange enough right now.
That's not what I meant, and you know it.
I mean, if he comes back any stranger, I don't want to be in the same neighborhood.
You don't want to be in the same neighborhood.
That's funny, neither do I.
Well, don't worry about it. Chances are we'll never see him again.
Never see John Wayne again?
What's the matter with you? We're playing a scene in the late 1800s. Don't call him John Wayne. John Wayne hasn't even been born yet. And we are the Wright brothers. Now, have you got that straight?
Of course.
Good.
We just had a nice long talk with a guy who hasn't been born yet.
And we're the Wright brothers.
Tommy and Dickie.
Tommy and Dickie are not the Wright brothers.
That's CBS propaganda.
All right, come on, have it your way. Now, let's finish this airplane.
Good, because I already hired a stewardess.
A stewardess? What do we want with a stewardess? We're building a plane to carry cargo.
You should have seen the cargo this stewardess was carrying last night.
You want to give it another try?
Okay,
all right. Now then, get the trim tab set this time. Ready, Wilbur?
Ready, Orville?
All right, contact.
Contact.
There we go.
I'm sure there were a lot of folks back in... I'm sure there were a lot of folks back in those days who truly believed that if God had intended man to fly, he would have given him wings! I wish we had more time to talk about some of the many wonderful things that have happened since you and I were born, but the old clock on the wall's got a beat on me. Now I guess I have just enough time to thank the wonderful Budweiser family for bringing us into your homes, and my thanks to all the beautiful people in front and back of the camera who were brought together tonight by their own goodwill and love of country. I'm a lucky fella for many reasons. Lucky that I was brought up to believe in a lot of things I found worthwhile. I believe in common decency, without which no society or goodwill can exist. I believe in my country, my family, my fellow man, and my God. I believe in straight talk and freedom with an accent on the free, which is still the best four-letter word I know. I believe in giving a fella a second, even a third chance. But keep your eye on him. I believe the moon's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there because this country on this planet is man's last chance to make a go of it for humanity. And I believe there's time in my life and yours to get this country in such shape that God would be proud of it. I believe your kids and mine are just you and me getting a second crack at the world. And our job is to see that they don't make all the mistakes we did and don't invent too many of their own. I believe 99% of them are a credit to their folks, a pride to their country, and deserve a pat on the backs from all of us for being what they are and not waving a white flag at life. I believe in hope for people of all ages, that equal opportunity is based on equal obligation. And speaking of opportunity, American opportunity has no limits, has been known to knock more than once. How about you very young people who see a tough life ahead? Well, when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox, Booker T. Washington was a 9-year-old slave. Yet by the time he was 28, he became president of Tuskegee Institute. And at 8 months, Neil Armstrong took his first small baby step toward mankind and fell flat on his face. At 6 years old, Mickey Mantle was settling for a base on balls. At 7, Wilt Chamberlain nailed a practice hoop over his garage without a ladder. And at 8, Charles Lindbergh was flying a kite and wondering how it'd feel to be up that high. At 9, Burt Bacharach was thinking the piano lessons would never end. How many of you are pushing 50 and complaining that the country is going to hell? Crispus Attucks was in his 40s when he died on State Street in Boston, fighting for the freedom that we share. And John F. Kennedy was 44 when he asked not what his country could do for him, but what he could do for his country. And how many of you over 65 are just settling down now to rest after a busy life? Well, a fellow by the name of Eisenhower, who had already lived one lifetime as a soldier, was reelected to the presidency when he was 67 years young. Well, by now I've made my point, or I never will. Oh, there's one other thing. Every man and woman or child I've ever known, met, seen, or heard of wants one thing more than anything else in the world. That one thing is tomorrow. Tomorrow, that's the only thing any of us have going for us. And I believe this: if tomorrow all of us, every single one of us, gets out of bed and says, this is my country and I'm going to do good for it, we'll make the greatest step forward since a pilgrim's foot found Plymouth Rock. Tomorrow, remember, this is my country and I'm going to do good for it. Just might work. We'll never know unless we give it a fair try. Oh yeah, and there's one other thing I'll say tomorrow, because I say it every day of my life. God bless America.
Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light
to the prairies,
To the ocean, white with foam.
God bless America,
My home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet
Also appearing in tonight's cast were Kathy Baker, Bernice Dalton, Jane Harris, Paul Reed Roman, Lisa Todd, Arthur Tovey. This is Ed McMahon.
Anheuser-Busch Incorporated, brewers of world-renowned Budweiser, the king of beers, has enjoyed bringing you the John Wayne Special, Swing Out, Sweet Land, and wishes you a pleasant good evening.